Let me ask just a simple question this morning. How many of you have ever been promised something or given a guarantee that maybe seems too good to be true? Amen, right? Maybe you've stepped into that car dealership and the car salesman says something too good to be true, right? Sorry if you're a car dealer, car salesman. This is a moment maybe where it's a promise, a guarantee, something that sounds really good, something you really, really want, right? But you know yourself and you think, there's no way with who I am this thing is possible. Or you know your past and you think, there's no way with what I've done, the mistakes I've made, that this guarantee is going to happen. Maybe once again you're stepping into the car dealership and you say, I know my financial situation. There's no way my payment is going to be that. But maybe it's something you really want. This is a tension that Cricket and I, my wife, we experienced when we were told that we should try to buy a home about 2 years ago. We were missionaries with Alaska Bible College, barely bringing in $30,000 a year. Not only that, meaning we made no money, not only that, but it came in super weird. It wasn't consistent. We had donors who paid money directly to us, and so when we went to a financial institution for a loan, they're like, are you guys drug dealers? Like, how does this money? It doesn't make any sense. But we had a friend who I was working with at the college who basically guaranteed me that we could get into a home. And I thought, that's too good to be true. I know who I am. I know our financial situation. I know that we've never cared an ounce about money, which means we don't have any. So it's not going to work. But I chose, I don't know why, to trust this guy and his guarantee. So next thing we knew, we got approved for a loan, and I still think it was illegal. I don't know how we got this loan. I still think it was a sketchy situation, but we got approved for this loan, and we found a beautiful little fixer-upper right in the heart of downtown Palmer. And we became that cliche couple buying their first home. We drove by it every single day. It was about a mile from where we were living or where we were renting at that time. We drove by it every day. Thankfully, the people, that was going to sound bad. Well, I'll say it. Thankfully, the person who owned it died. Bear with me. So they weren't in the house watching us drive by every day. It wasn't a creepy situation, but maybe neighbors were concerned. But we drove by it every day dreaming about what? Dreaming about our kids running around the lawn, right? Dreaming about the first time ever that we might be able to paint a room the color we wanted to paint it, right? Those silly moments. We were that crazy couple, randomly believing a guarantee, a promise that seemed too good to be true. And then one day, if you've ever bought a home, I should say it's not so random, because it seemed like every week I was getting a call from our loan agency saying, you're all done. And then I'd get another call. Wait, we actually need this one more document from you. We need another signature here. We killed 3 more trees and all these papers you have to sign, right? But one day we randomly got a phone call from our loan agency, and the lady on the phone said, by the way, you're looking great. Everything's coming together. Oh, by the way, you have to come up with $7,000 for a down payment. Once again, we were making $30,000 a year, and we got hit with something where all hope was lost in a way that was almost laughable, right? Cricket and I just laughed. There's no way that could ever be. The guarantee, the promise was too good to be true. And moving back into our God in the ancient story, I want to look at the story of a woman who experienced this very thing. She walked into this situation where she experienced a promise, she experienced a guarantee that seemed too good to be true. Her name is Sarah. And in Genesis chapter 12, Sarah, her name then was Sarai, and her husband Abraham, whose name then was Abram, received a really exciting but kind of pivotal or scary promise from God. Look at Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. Just to set some context, I want to read this promise to you. Genesis chapter 12, 1 through 3, it says, Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Sounds like a great thing, doesn't it? Sounds fantastic. Sounds maybe too good to be true. This is a promise that I'm sure brought both Sarah and Abraham excitement because it included a blessing from God himself. It included land. It included a kingdom. It included people who basically would be worshiping them for generations and generations. However, this promise was very complicated for Sarah. But not to get ahead of our story, we'll get to that. I just want to first answer a simple question. What do we know about Sarah? This series that we're moving into, God and the Ancients, is all about looking at Old Testament characters and how God interacted with their story, or maybe how God blew up their story and blew their expectations. So first things first, what do we know about this ancient? What do we know about Sarah? Number one, she is respected. She is respected. Not only were the promises given to Abraham in chapter 12, but they were also given to Sarah. Often we say these things were only told of Abraham, but let's look at them from the light of Sarah, where God says, from her will come a great nation. God will bless her and make her name great, not just his. She will be a blessing to many. And if that's not enough, God actually intentionally shifts the focus, pivots Abraham's focus from himself to his wife Sarah in Genesis chapter 17. Genesis 17 verses 15 and 16 is continuing in her story. Look at this. And God said to Abraham, as for your wife Sarai, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. She shall become kings of people, and they will come from her. That's huge. Kings, nations of kings will come from her. And what's up with this name change? Check out this quote. It's really wordy. It's kind of churchy and weird, but it's a powerful quote. It says this, Sarai now shifted to Sarah, as she was to be the princess. See, Sarah means princess. As she was to be the princess, not only because she was to be the ancestress of a great nation literally, of many nations spiritually, but also because the rank and power were to be possessed by her descendants. A succession of kings of their own race and lineage will be derived from her. Man, that's powerful. I don't know about you, but no one has ever said anything like that from me. Brandon, a nation of kings will come after you. Not quite. How about them apples, right? I mean, wow, in a way never seen before in a biblical narrative, God imputes, God speaks the value, speaks the worth, the intrinsic value and importance of the life of Sarah. First and foremost, this woman was respected. She was valued not only by nations and generations to come, but by God himself and the community surrounding her. Secondly, we see that she is real. And what I mean by that is, as a typical woman, she's really emotional. No, I'm just joking. Okay, I'm just joking. Just ask Cricket. I'm the most emotional guy on this planet. Like, I'm a mess when it comes to that stuff. But seriously, in a way that I really appreciate, she's totally upfront and real throughout her whole story. And you're not missing anything. We're going to go on piece by piece through her story, step by step. She's upfront in verses 16 and 17 of chapter 17. Introduce us to the too good to be true part of this story. Look at that with me. Chapter 17, verses 16 and 17. God continues, and he says, I will bless her. And moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of people shall come from her. Verse 17, listen to this. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? Talk about a logical, upfront, in-your-face type of question, right? He fell on his face and laughed. I mean, I'm just picturing that moment where God presents himself, which to us would be divine enough, right? I'm going to believe anything God who comes down and talks to me says, right? But all of a sudden, God says something that is so too good to be true, so out of this world, makes no sense, where Abraham fell on his face and says, dude, she's 90. You expect her to have a kid? She's 90. Not only do we learn that God is saying that a 90-year-old woman will soon have a child, but we also get a sense of the underlying weight that she's actually bearing, that this has been a problem for quite some time. And if Abraham's response wasn't real enough, I want you to look at chapter 18, verses 9 through 12, where we see Sarah's response. And we actually begin to see a little bit of vulgar sarcasm in this nature. Chapter 18, verses 9 through 12. They said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "She's in a tent." The Lord said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. This is the first she heard of this. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of the woman had ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed at herself, saying, "After I'm worn out and my Lord is old, shall I again have pleasure?" Let's think about that question for a moment. Let me state it again. After I'm worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure again? I don't think I have to go into detail about that question. Not only is this response honestly vulgar, but it's filled with doubt, it's filled with sarcasm, and it's this guarantee that becomes laughable. It's this hurdle in their promise that becomes laughable. And to lay some contextual framework of these emotions, this comes from a process that's decades long. I want you to just imagine with me. Not only were the things we've already talked about that are bringing out this response, like the fact that she's 90, it's not only that, but think about God appearing, maybe wives in the room, women in the room, God appearing to your husband and saying, "You will have generations of kings that come after you. I have a lineage that is profound and divine coming from you." And then as the wife realizing, "I'm barren." What's going to happen in that moment? And maybe immediately you think, awesome, God is going to heal me from this, and I'm going to finally get to hold a child of my own. And then what happens? 10 years go by. And you start to feel a weight. You start to feel a burden. You start to feel a pressure. Not only of, God made this promise to my husband, and all of a sudden it's my fault that it's not happening. All of a sudden it's my fault that it's not coming true. But I often wonder the things Abraham may have said to Sarah in these moments, because I know me as a husband, and how easy is it for us to blame our spouse for things like this? Imagine the weight, the pain, the emotion, the shame, the embarrassment that not only she's putting on herself, but potentially that her husband is putting on her. So much so that she makes a very real mistake, continuing this idea that she's real. She makes a real mistake that questions the faithfulness of God in Genesis chapter 16. Genesis 16, verses 3 through 6. So after Abraham had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abraham's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. And Sarai said to Abram, may the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me. But Abram said to Sarai, behold, your servant is in your power. Do to her as you please. Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her. Now, before we judge her too harshly for this moment of saying, how dare you, how could you offer another woman, a servant, to your husband, I want you to remind yourself, put yourself in the shoes of the pressure, the weight, the emotions she had. Now, contextually, this was socially accepted. This was something okay to do at that time. To us, that seems absurd and strange. Thankfully, that is absurd and strange. But not only was it socially acceptable in that time, but once again, she probably thought, I am making my husband's promise come true. I am doing what the Lord would have me to do and doing it in my own power to make sure the things that God said about our lives would actually come true. You see, many of us judgmental Christ followers would assume that this would discredit her from the original promise of God, right? Man, she all of a sudden heard this promise from God, and she took matters into her own hands, and she said, husband, here's another woman who can have a child. Do what you need to do here to make it happen. All of a sudden, in my opinion, that makes me think, well, God is surely not going to follow back up with them. God is surely not going to hold fast to his original promise. But what do we see in Genesis chapter 21, verses 2 through 7? Genesis 21, 2 through 7. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in an old age. Profoundly, God proves his faithfulness, and we see one more side of Sarah's realness. She's shocked into pure joy. She's not a robot, right? She's not saying, I knew this would happen. Thank you so much, Lord. She is consumed with laughter in this moment because what has happened actually seems too good to be true. But now she is holding proof, her own baby, of God's faithfulness. When she was filled with shame and burden and filled with pressure, she all of a sudden, that shifts and she says, God has made laughter for me. I don't know about you if you've had moments like this where you just laugh when God does something because it's so profound, so unreal. But when we were told that we needed to come up with $7,000 to finish the process of buying our house, we were filled with embarrassment to have to tell people why the process stopped, right? We have no money, so we didn't end up being able to buy the house. We were filled with shame. We were filled with disappointment. Like we were so excited. Addie, I think, was about 1, and we were so excited to see her running around that house and that property. We were disappointed. And I tell you, when a $7,000 check appeared in our mail one day, we were filled with laughter. When that $7,000 randomly just happened to be in our mailbox and we knew God was saying, buy this house, we were filled with laughter. And now every time we tell that story, we get to see other people filled with laughter because it's unbelievable how God is so faithful, even when we don't know what we're doing. So Sarah was respected, so much so that God changed her name. Secondly, she was real. She was human. She was honest with real emotions and made real mistakes. And finally, she's remembered. Switch all the way to the New Testament with me, Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11 is a famous section of Scripture commonly referred to as the Hall of Faith. It's where the writer of Hebrews goes through and just remarks characters of the Bible who had extreme, remarkable faith. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 11. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age since she considered him faithful who had promised. What's she remembered for? She's remembered for her mistakes. She's remembered for mocking God. She's remembered for lying to God himself. She's remembered for offering up a servant to sleep with her husband instead of herself. No, none of those things, right? She's remembered for faith. I don't know about you, but it's unbelievable to me that she didn't have a moment of actually cursing God. I mean, you think intentionally, practically, put your feet in her shoes in those moments where she goes through all this pain, all this pressure, all this probably depression, emotional wreckage. She offers up her servant, and then it's after that God comes back and actually helps her in the process of conceiving a child. You'd think she'd say, God, I don't even want this baby anymore. Look at what I've gone through just waiting for you. But she doesn't get there. Instead, what she models, what she's remembered for, is the honest, open, and transparent walk with God that we see time and time again throughout the book of Psalms. Her approach was Psalm 27, chapter 14. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. Sarah, all throughout her time, this doesn't mean we can't be emotional. This doesn't mean we can't complain to God. This doesn't mean we can't be frustrated. But all throughout her story, she waited for the Lord. She was strong. She took heart, and she waited for the Lord. And that made her respected. That made her real. And that makes her still remembered for her authentic faith today. But this series isn't just called The Ancients. It's not just a study on people. It's called God and the Ancients. So a second question that we have to answer this morning is, what does her experience with God teach us? What does her experience with God teach us? First, God works even when we don't. God works even when we don't. Aren't you glad God is smarter than we are? And aren't you glad Sarah's story didn't end with her offering up a servant to Abraham? I mean, think of all the things we would be doing wrong if the story ended there, right? Aren't you glad that God can still fulfill his purpose even when I screw up every moment of every day? Not literally, but almost. You see, as we already covered, even though it was socially accepted, Sarah shouldn't have offered the servant, right? Men, I need an amen on this one. Even though Sarah offered her, Abraham should have known better. All right, come on. Even still, God richly blessed and cared for Hagar, the servant, and that son that was born. He protected them, watched over them. When the son was dying in the desert, he provided water for them to drink and a way back to civilization. Even though Sarah and Abraham made all those mistakes, God still gave not so honest Abe and Sarah the promised child. He still fulfilled his promise to them. And it brings me to so much peace and joy that not only when I make mistakes can I know that God is still sovereign and he's still working, but even when I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to be doing, God is working in that. When Cricket and I had no idea, we were laughing at the fact that we had to come up with $7,000. We're like, we're done. We're going to keep lying to this loan agency and say it's no problem, and we're going to wait on the Lord and see what happens. We had no clue what was going to happen. The Lord was still working in all of that unknowns for us. That's profound, and that should bring us peace. You see, Psalm 27, we wait on the Lord. We know that he is working. We're strong, and we wait on the Lord. Look at Romans chapter 8, verse 26. What's on the screen? Even if you have your Bibles in front of you, look up on the screen for a moment. This is out of the Message, and I think it's worded just so perfectly. Meanwhile, the moment we get tired in the waiting, God's Spirit is right alongside helping us along. If we don't know how or what to pray, it doesn't matter. He does our praying in and for us, making prayer out of our wordless sighs and groans. He knows us far better than ourselves and keeps us present before God. Isn't that profound? First, God works even when we don't. What else do we learn about God in this story? Secondly, God remembers, and he will deliver on his promise. While we're faithless, he's faithful. While we're liars, he's honest. While we're hypocrites, he's true and steady and consistent. While Sarah tried to pave her own way and offer her own solutions, while Abraham failed to put his family first and think about his wife, God was working and paving the way. And I want to share this verse again with you, Genesis 21, 1-2. Think about all the pain that was going on, all the regret, all the remorse. Genesis 21, 1-2. The Lord visited Sarah as he said, and the Lord did as he promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time which God had spoken. Emotions, pain, burden, regret, gone. And what do we read next? That Sarah laughed. She was filled with joy and excitement. And as a segue into our Matsu challenge this morning, I just want to read some of the promises that God has for you. That sound okay? Romans 8:35. Not life or death, angels nor demons, no power or living thing, nothing can separate us, church, from the love of Christ. Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. 2 Corinthians 5:17, anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new creation. The old life is gone and a new life, something fresh, something warm, something filled with richness has begun. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 24. He personally, Jesus, carried our sins in his body on the cross so that we can be dead to sin and live for what is right. By his wounds, we've been healed. Matthew challenge this morning, number one, today, let's make an intentional decision to move past our past. Let's make an intentional decision to not live in our regrets, not live in our mistakes, because even when we make mistakes, God is working. There's freedom in that. My prayer for you this morning is that if you're living in a place of regret, if you're living in a place of shame, of maybe embarrassment about a decision you made, that you would put that, not to be cliche, but on the cross and let it go. Because God is still working and he will be faithful to his promise. Thankfully, God didn't hold Sarah's mistakes against her, nor does he for you. Even our mistakes, he's fighting for. Even in our mistakes, he's fighting for. Secondly, let's recount God's promises to ourselves every day this week and trust in his faithfulness. Pick one of those promises that we just went through and recount it to you and your family every day this week. Or maybe just go to Genesis chapter 1 and steep yourself in the emotions of Sarah when God was still faithful, even though she was faithless. And let that joy, let his faithfulness to his promises overtake any emotional battles you're going through in your life. Jesus, thank you so much for being faithful. Lord, thank you for knowing who we are and still wanting us to be involved and then working beyond who we are. God, there are no words that fully encapsulate that. God, thank you for in Scripture giving us stories that we can recount in our life every moment of every day that help us remember your faithfulness. And I pray that you would help us. You would empower us to do that this week. Lord, that if we're filled with regret, if we're filled with shame, if we're filled with embarrassment, Lord, that by your Spirit's power, we would step out of that. Lord, that you'd break those chains this morning. That your Spirit would bring to our mind and bring to our hearts in a real, intimate, personal way that you are faithful. That you care deeply about us. That, Lord, not only was Sarah respected, but in your eyes, we are respected by you. Lord, that you love us, that you cherish us, that you see beyond our mistakes, and you have something bigger and better, a promise for us. Lord, help us cling to that, we pray.